All right, look at these graphs. This is Facebook stock, Amazon stock, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana over the past 3 years. Notice a very common pattern. Things are reaching all-time highs. And in this video, I want to talk about, is that going to translate to a better market in 2024? How I feel these valuations are correlated to hiring. And specifically, I'll divide the video into 5 parts. Number 1, firings that have happened. Number 2, is this a senior engineer market? What does it even mean to be a senior engineer market? The 5% rule in a remote job, taking too much stress in a market like this and not focusing on the right thing. And lastly, markets which are obvious winners right now or in the next few months. Let's get right into the video. The first thing I want to talk about is firing and rifts. This is pretty commonly happening across tech. It's been a pattern, in fact, for the past 2 years. The numbers that you see on the internet are actually much lower than the amount of people that are being fired. A lot of people don't directly get fired. They get asked to voluntarily resign. So I think the number is much higher. In engineering, this number is slightly lesser than other job roles. But still, there's a decent chunk of people that are being laid off. What can you do if you are in a company that might be laying off? I have some pointers for you, even though I feel this will go away very soon. I think all the shrugging that had to happen has happened, and engineers are no longer, going to the office and chilling. I think people themselves realize if they want to retain their jobs, they need to work a little bit harder. And that's what the advice is. If you want to make sure you're not part of a layoff that might happen in your company soon, because whenever layoff happens, usually 20-30% of the companies sort of going bust, not more than that. So if you don't want to be in that lot, you can do a few things. Point number 1, not quiet quitting. This was a very common concept in 2021 where people weren't really putting up enough efforts. Everyone felt like they weren't being paid enough because a friend of theirs got a 1 CR offer or a 500K offer. And hence people were just doing enough work and not going the extra mile. I think if you're in that lot, it's very easy for the employer to identify that. I'm not saying you have to be super grateful for a job, but you shouldn't be thankless. And if you are thankless, probably don't be surprised when you get laid off. If you want to 100% retain your job, the worst thing you can do is quiet quit. Point number 2, not overcharging. This is a mildly controversial take, and it's true for people for whom stability matters much more than money. I think whenever a downsize is happening, it's happening because they're trying to decrease the expenses. And when that happens, the people that are sort of chosen the first are the people that are getting paid a lot. So this comes from a very close friend who doesn't make a lot of money. They make $70K US, and they're pretty happy with it. Everyone else in their company makes like 150K, 200K. They've kept very humble expectations considering they're from India, and they don't really pinch the company at all. So whenever layoffs have happened, I've told her, okay, you'll most probably be fine, because if they fire you, they're not getting as much outcome compared to, an employee who's charging 200K. Does that mean you should strive for lower salaries? No, this is for a very specific lot of people for whom stability matters more, and they're happy with 3 years of job making 70K each year compared to a 200K job and getting fired in 1 year. You can pick and choose what works for you, but a lot of people value stability. And for those people, make sure you're not taxing the company. If you know the company is happy giving you 100K, don't tax them and ask for 150K if you know they're not very comfortable with that number. Because when the riff happens, it's a very chaotic environment, and hence during that time you don't want to pop off as an expensive employee. So pick and choose if you think this point is relevant. But as someone who's very closely seen hiring and firing, I can tell you, if you're working at a very humble salary, they don't really benefit much by firing you, and hence you can sort of be in the lot they don't look at all. Lastly, if there's a lot of dependency on you, which means if you own a lot of the code base, if you are the person who's reviewing everything, if you're the person who's written most of the code, there's a very high probability you won't get laid off. So if there's one criteria to not getting laid off, irrespective of your salary, it's how much dependency the company has on you. And if that dependency is high, there's a very low probability of you getting fired. You might get a pay cut, but them not firing you will be an obvious decision. All right, the second point is that this is a senior engineer only market, or it's much easier to get hired as a senior engineer. I think that's generally been true. Other than campus placements, whenever a company is hiring, they will of course prefer someone who has some years of experience. I think there's a sweet spot of somewhere in the range of 2 to 8 years of experience that's best for a company. At the same time, just because you have a lot of experience does not necessarily dictate that you're really good at a certain tech stack. You might have been working for 5 years, but you might be working in C++, and the company's requirement might be, let's say, the MERN stack. So what you can do as a person who has minimal experience at this point is either get an internship. I think internships are much easier to get. I'm seeing a lot of people on my Twitter suddenly getting a lot of internships. These aren't very well paid internships, but what's the rule of thumb to learn programming? It is to build projects, right? And rather get paid something while building a project and build something that a startup really needs compared to building your own, let's say, YouTube clone. So I think if you're not getting a lot of offers or you feel like you don't have enough experience, try to get that initial underpriced internship. Don't work for free. But even if they're paying you 20K, 30K INR a month, at least you get that experience of working in a company. And the bigger thing is you can put that experience wherever you want. I think you can twist an internship experience as a full-time experience and, within 6 months, technically have like a year of experience. So try to game the system a bit. If you know that you have good skills, if you know you can work at par with another engineer who's been working for 2 years, so try to get some pseudo experience in there. Personally, for me, TopTal does not hire people who don't have remote experience. But for me, my 2 GSOC internships, which were actually 2 months of internship, but twisted into 5 months of internships, gave me sort of 10 months or a year of remote work experience, which was sort of what got me in the door. So if you know you have the skills and you can pass the interviews, try to game the system a bit and try to get that internship, even if it doesn't pay you much. Number 2, if you're not able to get an internship also, ask your friends who are working at companies, what do they work on? What is the code that they write? If their code is open source, try to go through it. Today, thankfully, a lot of, good code is out there for you to look at. At least make sure you know enough compared to a senior engineer. Whenever the market recovers, if the market recovers, you're at least there as a profound engineer who can get hired, even if you don't have the experience. Number 3, pick some small bounties from time to time. Not necessarily everything you write or all the time that you spend coding needs to translate to money. If you go through my last video, I tried to contribute to GSOC for 2.5 hours. I can't even participate in GSOC anymore, but I did it for the fun. I think there are a lot of, low hanging fruit in a few code bases that pay you $5, $10, $50 from time to time. If you have nothing else right now to work on, try to go through these code bases, pick one and, go very deep in it. Try to understand, not for the money, but for how engineers in that company are working and see how far you are from the senior engineer there. Point number 3, the 5% rule. I feel like if you're targeting a remote job, if you're targeting to be that person who does not get laid off, has the freedom of, picking their company / client and, can negotiate their package really well, you lie in a 5% amongst, let's say, 100 people who are in tech. What are these 5% doing differently? I'll start with a few pointers. Number 1, the maker mindset. Here is a comment from my last video where it says, आपने जो P5 editor बताया था वो और गाय नहीं बर्बाद कर दिया आपने. I had more than 2,000 lines of code there. It basically means processing is an organization that did not come to GSOC this year. And this person is a little sad about it on a YouTube comment. Surprisingly, the same thing happened in 2015. Processing was an organization which I was contributing to, and they did not come in GSOC this year. But rather than cribbing about it on the internet, I sort of picked up another organization and made it to GSOC that year. So what does that tell you? Have a maker mindset. If you feel like something bad has happened, and this is just a very small thing. Comparatively, you might have bad days. You might have an interview that you flunk. This is part of the whole interview tech cycle. You need to keep your head down and keep building rather than, worrying about whatever happened. Number 2, differentiating from the crowd is super important. You have to stay one step ahead of what's happening out in the world. If everyone's doing DSA, you should do open source. If everyone's now doing open source, you should do something else, build projects. If everyone's building projects, you should look at an AI company. Whenever special knowledge becomes general knowledge is when you should move on to find something better. A few examples of this today might be, finding a niche and going very deep in it, finding a company in Web3 in AI, and trying to make your way through, trying to just find a learning path on things that are really difficult. Web development and DSA is slightly easier to learn today. There are harder technologies that I would spend my time on if I was trying to be in this top 5%. Number 3, in outsized outcomes like these, luck does play a decent role. You of course need to be really good to crack a remote job or get a high-paying offer. But at the same time, especially in a market like this, being at the right place at the right times helps. So luck can play a decent part. You can maximize your luck by approaching a lot of companies and throwing a lot of arrows at the dart. But in the end, you might be the best developer out there, yet might not be able to reach that fantasy number of 100K, 150K, whatever that number is in your head for a long time because you're not able to reach that right opportunity. And that's fine because it takes several iterations to reach that number that you deserve. It's not necessary that you'll get, a 6-figure offer on day 0. But as long as you have those skills, eventually at some point, you'll either be promoted in the company that you're providing that value to, or luck will come into the picture and you'll finally reach that offer that you've been striving for. And lastly, keep an eye out for where new money or new value is being generated. A good example of this is back in 2004, Social networks were a new thing where a lot of value was generated. Around 2010, e-commerce websites, Uber is a good example of where, a lot of value was generated. Ride-hailing apps came as a new market and, became an industry in itself. Today, that's probably, a bunch of DeFi products in Web3 or LLM providers that clearly are going to create a market of their own, and there'll be big products that come out of it. If you're in that market, if you take that bet even on a small company, as long as the market grows, you grow with it. So one thing that at least I do, I don't know if this is like a 5% thing or a 1% thing, but keep an eye out for what new markets are being created. And even if a company there is paying you less, eventually that company might grow very quickly. And if you're part of the initial team, you'll eventually make money one way or the other. That's all the points I had for the 5%. I can almost tell you it's not too difficult to, reach this 5% because the pool is really big and a lot of people, just drop off in development. A lot of people just want their first job and eventually become engineering managers or, PMs, basically get out of coding. So the final pool that you're competing with to reach this 5% is not too much. And anyone who gets their mind to it, as long as they're consistent, I think can reach this, top 5%. Point number 4. This is a slightly off topic sort of a take. And it's around not taking a lot of stress. In the end, markets are growing, markets are going down. Eventually, you'll be stressed always. If in a bull run, you might feel like, oh, why am I not making 1 CR my counterpart is, or, I wanted to get into Google, Facebook, wherever. During a bear run, it feels like, oh, everyone's getting laid off. I'm not getting my first offer. So stress will never go away. In the end, tech is overall growing. It's just growing like this rather than growing in a straight line. So avoid spending too much time on toxic social media. I think builders are just keeping their head down and building irrespective of what market cycle is going on. And I think that's the best thing you can do. Don't spend a lot of time reading blog posts or, looking at videos like these. If I'm being honest, they don't give any substantial outcome, maybe other than some motivation. No one really knows where the market is going. If they knew, they wouldn't have to come to YouTube and explain it in a video. All of this is highly unpredictable. Generally, the trend is that tech goes up, and even if it does not, I don't know what else I'd be doing if, not building tech product. So if that's you, the market cycle does not matter. What matters is what new technologies are coming out and how much they excite you. As long as you're being excited in this field, you're learning something new, money will come in one form or another. Last point, markets that are clear winners either right now or in the next few months. I think there are 2 broad markets that you already know of. AI has been on an uptick. The reason I feel there will be a lot of hiring here is because, one, I've talked to a lot of companies, and there's a video coming very soon on the channel where I talked to a Y Combinator founder and gather a lot of stats on, how they hire. TLDR is almost 60-70% of YC's batches AI companies, and they're looking for problem solvers, not necessarily, PhDs in AI. So that's one field that's growing. That's one place where, there's a void that engineers need to fill. So that's one bet. That's a decent bet to take. The second bet has gone up really quickly in the past few months. Unsure if it'll stick that way. It also might explode. And this is Web3. Web3 has reached all-time highs today. And as you can see, there's not a lot of noise. Not a lot of people are talking about it because real euphoria in Web3 kicks in when you're at 2-3x of the last cycle's all-time highs. So I think in a few months, if the market keeps going up, is when you'll see a lot of irrational funding announcements, very similar to what happened in AI in the last few months. So this is something I'd aggressively keep my eye out on because number one, there isn't as much technical knowledge or, call it like technical filtering criteria required in Web3 companies compared to an AI companies. A lot of AI companies can get a little finicky that you need to, have a PhD or, at least have a master's. Compared to Web3 companies, most of them don't care. They need a lot of application engineers. A lot of them are building products for developers. So they just need not full stack developers, maybe a little bit more, but, nothing like machine learning research to hit the ground running. So if there's 2 markets I would aggressively look at. I was talking about, how you can differentiate yourself and stay one step ahead of everyone. I'm just going to come here and give this advice once. I'd pick one of these 2 fields because AI, there are a lot of very clear product market fits that are coming out. And Web3, money go up. That's the best reasoning I can give you. Even though Web3 products are much harder to explain, there are some very basic use cases in Web3 that, make legit money. So I just keep my eye out on those and pick which one of these interests me more and go deep into it. This answer was very different until a few months ago. I was aggressively telling people to, just pick AI over Web3. But right now it's a very hard choice. I think there'll be almost equal amount of hiring in both the places. So whatever interests you more, I'd go for that over, what has hype right now. And what has hype right now, I think Web3 has a little more hype because, well, the past 2 months were a little crazy when it comes to the cryptocurrency prices. All right. So pick and choose. None of this is, financial advice or, even brotherly advice. All of this is what I feel I would do if I was in your shoes. That said, I'll be doing a more detailed overview of all of this in a meetup very soon. So if you're part of the cohort, we're doing a Bangalore meetup on 14th. I hope to see a few of you there. If you're not part of the cohort, you can just tag along with a friend who's part of a cohort. The goal of this specific meetup is to dive a little bit deeper into Web3 because that's something I know very well. Understand the industry, talk to a few experts. So I think it'll be a pretty interesting meetup. I hope to see a few of you there. That's all I had for this one. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.
कभी कभी आदती जिंदगी में यूं ही कोई अपना लगता है कभी कभी आदती वो बिछड़ जाए तो एक सपना लगता है आदती हंसते 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 तू जरा नहीं तो बस थोड़ा थोड़ा थोड़ा